All right, guys, welcome back to Falcon Central Radio on the Pro Football Central Radio Network. I am one of your hosts, Aaron Freeman, and I am joined, as usual, by my co-host, Scott Karasik. This week, we are back to talk about the Falcons' Week 13 loss to the Minnesota Vikings. We're going to preview Saints Hate Week because we got a Thursday night game coming up against those hated New Orleans Saints. We're going to answer your mailbag questions as well. So, as we always do when we start off the show, if there's any roster moves that the Falcons have made, we discuss those. The Falcons did sign a cornerback yesterday. They picked up Leon McFadden. They wound up cutting running back Terrence McGee, and they put McGee on the practice squad and wound up cutting Jeremy Boykins. Oh, long may he reign from the practice squad. Scott, any thoughts on these moves, particularly the McFadden one?
I think the McFadden one's just a depth move to make sure that they've got someone on the roster that can play the nickel in case old Brian Poole can't go. McFadden's a little bit better athlete than Poole is, but he's not as good as instinctually. So it'll be interesting to see how they work him in. If Poole can't go again on Thursday, it wouldn't shock me to see him go with McFadden in the slot, and that might just be what they feel is the best. Although I think it worked well going with Kazee at free safety and Allen in the slot. And I think they should roll with that until Brian Poole's better.
Yeah, I think this is a depth move. I suspect that McFadden is going to keep a spot warm until Brian Poole is fully healthy. In terms of him playing a role this upcoming season, or the remainder of the season, I'm sorry. I don't really expect anything. I think the Falcons are content to go with, this week particularly, with Trufant Alford, Bleedy Ray Wilson, and C.J. Goodwin as their four cornerbacks that are going to be active. If Poole is healthy, he'll be active, and you might see probably they might keep Bleedy Ray active just to have another body there. So I think we'll probably see Leon McFadden inactive for the next couple of weeks. Whether or not he sticks around for the rest of the season, we'll see. I think the value of him is he's a very experienced special teams player. And when they worked out both him and Leodis McKelvin last week, that was really the difference. McKelvin's more the guy that you would sign if you needed a starter right away, the guy that can play immediately. But McFadden's more the guy that you can sort of keep on the back end of the roster. And if you have to sort of shuffle the depth chart a little bit, he can come in and fill that role that Goodwin does or Bleedy Ray Wilson does, playing some special teams. But in the meantime, I don't expect him to really get much action in the next couple of games. So let's talk about this Vikings loss. The Falcons lost a very low-scoring game, probably like the lowest-scoring game we've seen from the Falcons in a very, very long time, 14-9. Some of the key stats from the game to blame some of the Falcons' scoring issues. They couldn't convert on third down. They were 1 for 10. Understandable that they struggled on third downs against the league's best third down defense, but certainly you would expect a little bit better than 1 for 10, maybe like 3 or 4 for 10 or something like that. They did, however, rush for 102 yards. That was tied for the third highest rushing total against the Vikings, who have one of the league's best run defenses this year, so that was certainly a positive. Another stat that sort of stands out in a lot of people's eyes, Julio Jones was held to 2 catches on 6 targets for only 24 yards. Not a big day for Julio after a monster week against the Buccaneers. I think people expected Julio to do a little bit more, had a drop or two in this game that certainly limited his effectiveness. So, Scott, I'm curious sort of which players sort of stood out to you in your mind watching this game, and maybe some guys that certainly you wished would have played a little bit better.
So I thought Tack was awesome. He was just killing it off the edge. Beasley was doing well for the most part. I didn't like his tackling in the open field, but I thought he did well just in general. Freeman was killing it. I don't know why they went away from running the ball with him. It made no sense to me. And then Robert Alford had just an insane game where he had 1 pass deflection on 3 targets, and I think he allowed a 6-yard catch. And that's all that happened to him all day. He just was killing it. And he did that against Stephon Diggs. They had to move Diggs and Thielen over to the other side just to even get any sort of anything out of them. So if it was up to me, I'd give player of the game to Robert Alford or even Rico Allen. Rico Allen had a great game. Guys that didn't have a great game, I thought Julio did fine. I thought he was getting open, but he did drop 2 balls, and that's kind of uncharacteristic. Matt Ryan had probably the worst game we've seen of him since 2014, 2013. I don't know what was getting into him, but it just was an ugly game. And then, I mean, really, I thought the offensive line did okay. I thought the defensive line was doing okay, but there really wasn't anybody that like stood out that had a bad day. They just weren't clicking and meshing well together, if that makes any sense. Like, I don't think anybody in specifics outside of Ryan really had a bad day. I just think as a whole, the team wasn't really meshing. And I think a lot of that had to do with going against the Vikings defense that's just insanely good.
Fair enough. For me, yeah, I thought Jake Matthews struggled a lot more than I expected. I knew he would struggle going up against Everson Griffin. Everson Griffin is the type of pass rusher that really does tend to give Jake Matthews the most trouble because he not only has speed, he also has power. Griffin's really sort of developed a nice spin move the last couple of years. Obviously, it's not as good as the great Brooks Reed or the great Dwight Freeney spin move, but maybe he's got the third best spin move in the NFL. And so I thought Jake Matthews really struggled early in the game. I thought his play sort of picked up during the middle of the game, but then down the stretch, I thought he struggled again. And I think some of that pressure sort of got to Matt Ryan. I think he missed a couple of throws. I don't know if it was his worst game that he's had in a while, but I certainly think there was a couple of throws that he missed that certainly, had he hit one or two of those, could have made the difference in the win. And a couple of them came on some of those key third downs late in the game. Positives, I think you're right. I think despite the fact that the Falcons lost, I thought there were a lot of good positive performances from this team overall. I thought the pass rush was good early, sort of faded a little bit later. I thought the run defense, even though they got gashed at various points in the game, I thought they did a semi-competent job for a good portion of the game. They just couldn't sustain it throughout the game. I thought the secondary did a good job stepping up. Bleedy Ray did a good job stepping up in Trufon's absence and in Poole's absence. As you mentioned, Ricardo Allen had another solid performance as well. So a lot of good play overall or across the Falcons roster, but just wasn't enough from some of the key playmakers to really, pull out the win for the Falcons. Now, we always do the Brother of the Week, which is brought to you by Evan Birchfield, one of our biggest fans. The Brother of the Week concept is one of those things where it's basically who had the best performance that won't get the headlines. For me, I'm going to pick Vic Beasley. Vic Beasley got a lot of criticism on Sunday. I understand that. There was a couple of times when he was caught in the open field and missed on the tackle, and it made him look bad, and people were sitting there like, why isn't Vic Beasley rushing the quarterback? Well, the reason why Vic Beasley isn't rushing the quarterback is because he's not that good pass rusher. I don't want to sit here and knock Vic Beasley, but the reality is when Brooks Reed, Tack McKinley, or Adrian Claiborne are rushing the quarterback, the Falcons do a little bit better job getting pressure on the quarterback this season than they do when Vic Beasley's rushing the quarterback. I think Vic Beasley's doing good at the linebacker position. I think he did his job for the most part on Sunday, other than a missed tackle or two, or maybe a couple of instances where I would have preferred to see him get some pressure going against a guy like Rashad Hill. But I honestly think Vic Beasley's future on this roster is going to be as a linebacker, and I think all the reps that he gets now are going to certainly help him out long term. I don't really see, the repeat of his performance last season with the sack total. I think a lot of that was due to the less than stellar competition he faced. I don't think he's really shown a ton of growth as a pass rusher, but I think it's funny to me because like all the things that now people are saying about Vic Beasley as a pass rusher, like I was saying that a year ago, and everybody, was sitting there saying, "Oh, Aaron, you're just hating because you don't have any good things in your life or whatnot." But I think Vic Beasley's fine as a linebacker. I think he's doing well. I think I still think Devondre Campbell leaves a lot to be desired for me as far as a run defender goes. I think Vic Beasley still has a lot of potential there. You still just got to work out the kinks from playing a brand new position. But that's my Brother of the Week. My defending of I will defend Vic Beasley, the linebacker, to the death. Not so much Vic Beasley, the defensive end, but we'll see.
I still think he does his best work as a defensive end when he can put his hand in the ground and go for it. But I'll agree to disagree with you. I think that had he focused on that this year, like they were originally planning, because Beasley didn't really play strong side linebacker until Duke got hurt. Once Duke got hurt, they put him at strong side linebacker. He looked solid, but it shouldn't be a development year. They should go back to what the original plan was. Duke Riley's starting to kind of pick it back up. So we'll see what happens after this little mini bye between Thursday and Monday game. But I wonder if Vic Beasley is going to see a lot more time at end and a lot less time at linebacker once Duke Riley's fully healthy. If I was going to pick a brother of the week, I'd have to go with Ricardo Allen. He does so much everywhere, and pretty much everyone's like, oh, he's just okay. Oh, he's average. He's a decent deep safety. Dude was everywhere on the field. He was making plays, and I mean, I've never seen a guy basically single-handedly stop a drive from a safety position the way that he
did. Okay. Sorry. All right. The next mailbag question comes from Evan Birchfield. Of course, it is. Sorry. Discuss the Julio Rhodes matchup from last week.
I think the film shows that Julio won the matchup. He just didn't get the ball. I think Rhodes was not really on him as much as people thought he was going to be. So, yeah.
I, surprise, believe the opposite. I do love this tendency that when Julio has one of these games, and he's now had 3 of them against Xavier Rhodes, and previously he had some of these games against Josh Norman, there is a tendency to sort of try to make excuses and be like, oh, Julio was open and all these sorts of things. Like, Xavier Rhodes did an excellent job. Did he shut him down as in the sense of Julio was never open on any plays? No. But the reality is, in a quote-unquote normal game, Julio Jones, if he's running routes on 40 or 45 plays, he's going to be open 30 times. And you put him on man-to-man coverage. So what teams do is they wind up pressing him and giving him safety help. And so now you can limit that to 10 times. And I think really looking at the game and watching the film today, Julio was open maybe like 4 or 5 times. I think that's a testament to Xavier Rhodes. You're not going to shut down Julio Jones, but it's one of those things that if you can hold him to 2 catches for 24 yards on 6 targets, and you can keep his targets under 10 targets, that's a win for the cornerback. And I think, we all love Julio. He's the best player on the planet when he's at his best. He wasn't at his best on Sunday. I think a lot of that has to do with Xavier Rhodes and the Vikings scheming a way to sort of keep him clamped. So I think Rhodes did an excellent job. I think it's a win for Rhodes. I think it's something that he's done now 3 times. I think the only other cornerbacks that can really say that they've done that is Champ Bailey in 2012, Josh Norman a couple of times in 2012 and 2013, and 2014 maybe one other time. And then I just blanked on who the other – Patrick Peterson last year. I think other than those guys, very few guys can say that they've, quote-unquote, shut down Julio Jones. They did it. Kudos to Xavier Rhodes. I'm not going to take anything away from him. He did an excellent job. The Vikings did an excellent job. Julio is not infallible. And so we saw it on Sunday, and it is what it is.
I don't think the Saints have anybody that can do the same thing to Julio Jones.
Marshawn Lattimore is pretty good. Now we'll see how
when he's healthy, he's pretty good. Whether he's 100%, that's the real question. If he's not 100%, I don't think he's gonna be able to handle it.
We'll see. I mean, look, I think, I'm not going to sit here and make predictions because I've made predictions before and Julio has eviscerated them. There have been games where I thought Julio was going to eviscerate a guy and he didn't have a big game. So we'll see what happens. But there's only a handful of dudes on the planet that I think are capable of pulling a Xavier Rhodes or a Josh Norman or a Patrick Peterson. And I think Marshawn Lattimore has the potential to be in that group. So we'll see what happens. I think his sitting out the last couple of games is specifically to try to get him healthy, to be healthy for this Thursday night game. We'll see what happens. But in the meantime, I do think it'll be an interesting matchup, and I think this is going to be a fun matchup to watch for many, many years to come.
Well, I mean, he's been limited in practice all week so far, too. So it wouldn't be shocking to see him held out or see him limited in the game.
We'll see. I mean, the Saints aren't practicing this week, so part of the whole we'll talk about this when we get to the preview.
They're not practicing.
They're just going through walkthroughs this week.
Ah.
To try to save their guys.
Yeah, he was listed as limited.
Yeah, so like their injury report isn't really accurate because it's like, well, if we did practice, this guy would be limited. If we did practice, this guy would be held out. So I think they're sort of fudging the injury report to try to get a little bit of a competitive edge. We'll see what happens on Thursday, but I think the Saints are, I don't think we can read too much into their injury report this week. Before we move on to that game, we did get a question from Brian at your homie Brian. Do you think the Falcons offense was intimidated by the Vikings defense, particularly Matt Ryan?
No, I just think that they were out of sync. I think they've been out of sync, but they had a couple promising days. I just think they've been out of sync all year, and I don't know why they've been out of sync, other than maybe first year coordinator shift, like what happened with Shanahan. And at this point, I really don't know. I don't think that they were intimidated, but I think that they just needed to get the shit together. Ryan needs to get the ball down a little bit on these deep passes too. If he doesn't overthrow his guys, times they probably end up scoring touchdowns.
Yeah, can't disagree with anything you said there. I think the Vikings, I think one of the reasons why the Vikings have had success against the Falcons under Mike Zimmer is they go into these games and they say, we're gonna be physical with the Falcons, and we can punch them in the mouth, and they're not gonna punch back. And I think certainly in 2014 and in 2015, that was the reason why the Falcons lost the game. I think Quinn has done a good job of sort of helping the Falcons not be that team that they were under the Mike Smith regime, which is, quote unquote, finesse or soft team. I think we've made significant strides, but I don't think we're quite at the level where the Vikings are. And I think I saw that on tape. And in there, you can talk about the officiating if you want. And there was a couple of times where Viking defenders were sort of knocking and chipping our guys on top of the routes and sort of knocking them down. And I think, it's just part of their whole mentality of being bullies. And I don't think the Falcons, I won't say they were intimidated by it, but they certainly didn't respond well to it. And I think with Matt Ryan in particular, I think he missed a couple of throws, probably 5 or 6 of them. 3 of them were probably deep balls, one to Taylor Gabriel, one to Tevin Coleman, one to Julio Jones. He underthrew Sanu on that third down late on that crossing pattern that wound up getting challenged and overturned. And then there was probably one other throw that he missed that I'm blanking on the specific example. There was a deep throw to Taylor Gabriel, a deep shot, a post that Gabriel ran that would have been a touchdown. I think it was on the opening drive that Matt Ryan just didn't pull the trigger on. And, it is what it is. So I don't feel like they were intimidated, but it's certainly one of the fair criticisms you can say about Matt Ryan throughout his career has been if you hit him in the mouth early in a game, it does affect his ability to pull the trigger on certain throws. He starts to play a little bit with happier feet. It throws off the timing, and he starts to panic a little bit in the pocket and try to get rid of the football because he knows he's under pressure. I think Griffin's ability to pressure him early in that game, particularly tearing Jake Matthews a new one, probably is one of the causes of that issue. And so maybe that's the reason why Matt Ryan missed some throws. Using the word intimidate, I don't like that word because it sort of has a certain connotation with it. But certainly I do think the Vikings challenged the Falcons and basically we're going to be more physical than you, and they were. And I think that was a contributing factor to why they won the game. So, hopefully if we get another shot at them, in a couple of weeks, maybe we'll be able to turn the tables on him, but we'll see how it goes. All right, let's talk about this upcoming Saints game, the game that everybody looks forward to. Thursday night game at home. It seems like anytime we play the Saints on Thursday night, it's always in Atlanta, which we appreciate you, schedule makers. You haven't done us too many favors this year, but we'll take that one as one. I don't know someone could tell me how this factors into the division race. I don't really care about the division. I've been assuming for the last couple of weeks that the division is out of reach. But maybe we still got a mathematical shot of winning if we win this Thursday. But
if the Falcons win out, they would win the division based on division tiebreaker with the Panthers and based on head-to-head tiebreaker with the Saints. If all teams, won games that weren't against the Falcons.
Okay. All right. So there's still a shot. You're saying there's a chance. We just talked about it. The Saints are pretty beat up. They got a bunch of injuries, a bunch of guys that are limited or out in practice. As I said, I think they're fudging their injury report a little bit. So I think some of these guys that we're going to rattle off as questionable and have been out or limited in practice this week will wind up playing on Thursday. But who knows? And certainly some of these guys are certainly key players. I think Marshawn Lattimore is one of them. He's dealing with an ankle injury. Their other two cornerbacks, and P.J. Williams and King Crawley, are also dealing with injuries. Williams has a shoulder injury. Crawley has an abdominal injury. Teron Armstead is dealing with a thigh injury. He's missed some time. They replaced him with Andrus Peat last week at left tackle, moving him from guard. But Peat is also dealing with a growing injury, so I even have no clue at that point. Maybe it's Sinio Casalamedi to play left tackle. If both of those guys don't play, Marcus Williams is dealing with their safety. The rookie safety is dealing with a groin injury. Mark Ingram's been limited with a toe injury. Trey Hendrickson, the other defensive end.
I think it'd be Bryce Harris at left tackle and then Sinio Calamedi at left guard.
Okay. I have no idea what that's the levels of they're like third string guys. Basically, if both Armstead and Pete don't play, there's going to be a third string offensive lineman starting for the Saints.
Yeah, and I think the Falcons would be able to destroy that matchup.
Yeah, so obviously, and they also have injuries to Trey Hendrickson, the defensive end. He's got a knee injury. A.J. Klein, the linebacker, has a groin injury. So I just named basically, 9 starters that are potentially beat up or are going to be limited this week. So it's sort of similar to what we faced with the Seahawks, assuming all those guys are legitimately beat up and aren't going to play. So that's certainly a very good scenario for the Falcons, who are relatively healthy. Trufant's coming back. He's out of the concussion protocol. 99.9% chance he's going to play. We know Andy Levitri's out dealing with the triceps injury. The Falcons will plug in Ben Garland in his spot. Brian Poole's really the only player that's really up in the air, unless you want to count Eric Saubert, who's dealing with a back injury as well. But we know Saubert plays like 2 snaps on offense, so it's not a big deal. It's a special teams guy. But Poole is probably the key injury, just because he could be a critical component playing in the nickel against the Saints. But we'll see how it goes. What are some of the key matchups that you're looking forward to seeing how the Falcons handle this week, Scott?
Honestly, I don't think the Saints linebackers can handle the Falcons running backs. A.J. Klein's slow. Monty Teo is slow. Craig Robertson is slow. I'm not seeing the speed there to actually cover any of these guys, especially Monty Teo. I think if you're going to attack the Saints, especially on defense, they're going to try and blitz you all day. They're going to try and use guys like David Onyemata, Tyler Davidson, Hiloi Kukakaha. They're going to try and get these guys as much pressure as possible. And I just don't see it happening as long as the Falcons can, obviously set the edge in the run game on Cameron Jordan and just force them to try and cover these running backs out the backfield. I don't think they have good guys in coverage at those spots at all. And if Marcus Williams is banged up, you're going against Raphael Bush, and I don't think Bush can handle a guy like Austin Hooper in coverage. I don't think he can carry him. I don't think Vaccaro is any good in the first place. I think he's just a dirty player. But I'm not a Kenny Vaccaro fan by any means.
Fair enough. He's certainly done some things that I won't even defend him in this case. Yeah. So go ahead.
Yeah, so I don't think that the Saints defense is as good as they're getting credit for. I think they're getting a lot of good matchups that are helping out their numbers. Like they played the Bills when the Bills put in Nathan Peterman, right?
Thought that was the Chargers that played.
Nah, the Bills put Nathan Peterman in and then they sat him. Or no, Tyler Taylor got hurt, so they saw Nathan Peterman half the game. This is what happened. I just remember Nathan Peterman playing against them. And then, you know, the Rams murked them. I think the Falcons have the same blueprint and can execute the same blueprint the Rams did. You know, they didn't get the Packers with Aaron Rodgers. They still gave up 38 to the Lions, but the Lions have no defense. Jay Cutler didn't go unconscious like he did against the Falcons for that half of game. Like all the teams that they've got good defensive games against, it's like, all right, Dolphins, Packers without Rodgers, Bears, Buccaneers, Bills without Tyrod really healthy. And then like everybody else they've allowed 21 plus to. Outside of like a Panthers game. So, and we all know division games are different. So I think the Falcons can score points on them. I'm not seeing on film the same kind of defense that I look at when I see the stats. That makes sense.
No, it makes sense. I think for me at least, you know, and I don't consider myself a Saints expert. I've only seen a couple of their games. I think a lot of it has to do with Lattimore and Jordan playing at really high levels. I think you can make a case, at least statistically, that Lattimore has been the best cornerback in the league this year. I think you can make a case statistically that Cameron Jordan has been the best pass rusher in the league this year. And so I think what happens is when they play, you know, with the Saints offense being much more of a balanced offense that can not only throw the football but also run the ball effectively and finish games, and with their defenses, the strength of their defense being their pass defense, it basically means once they get a lead, they can hold the lead. And that's the difference between this year's Saints team and past year's Saints teams, which was, you know, even when they got a lead, they couldn't hold it. And most of the times they couldn't get a lead. And so a lot of their success, particularly last year, I thought was due to them sort of padding their stats late in games in garbage time and sort of looking more effective and more efficient as an offense than they actually were. But I do agree with you, Scott. I think this is a defensive matchup where the weaknesses of the Saints match up pretty well with some of the strengths of the Falcons, particularly their run defense. They're 26th in DVOA against the run this year, according to Football Outsiders. I think we know the Falcons' run game has been very effective. They proved that on Sunday against the Vikings. If you can run the football on the Vikings, you can certainly run the football on the Saints. I think
and they're allowing 4.6 yards per carry.
So it's one of those things where I think the Falcons should be able to move the ball against the Saints. I'm not necessarily expecting Matt Ryan to throw for like 350 yards, but I don't think he really needs to. And if he does, I think like 150 of those yards should be to Tevin Coleman and Devontae Freeman, who I agree with you, Scott, should have very favorable matchups against the Saints linebackers with guys like Klein, who's nicked up, and Craig Robertson. Those guys can't stick with our running backs in the open field. And so I think the Falcons should be able to attack that. Is the weakness of the Saints defense. Their secondary has made significant improvements thanks to Lattimore. King Crawley's been playing well. They've gotten much better safety play from Bell and Williams, but I do feel like the Falcons can attack that. I think Mohamed Sanu should have a favorable matchup against Vaccaro. So even if Lattimore plays and does well against Julio and keeps Julio contained to like a 4 or 5 catches for 40 or 50 or 60 yards, then I still think the Falcons passing game can find outlets, particularly from a guy like Sanu, who should be able to go to work against Vaccaro. But again, I do think the centerpiece of the Falcons' offensive game plan should be their running game. I don't have a ton of confidence whether the Falcons' defense is going to have a great game against the Saints' offense. Alvin Kamara scares the bejesus out of me. I don't really think the Falcons have anything they can throw at Kamara specifically that's going to really slow him down. I don't worry too much about the rest of the Saints' offense, which is like a first time I've ever really said that as a Falcon fan in the last decade.
With
But
Trufant healthy, I agree.
like I feel like we can match up like Trufant with Michael Thomas. I feel
Mm-hmm.
like the Saints. The key is going to be getting like the Falcons beat the Saints when they pressure Drew Brees, and I feel
Yep.
like our pass rush is capable of doing that, and especially if the Saints are beat up front, as we just discussed. But I do think like Kamara is going to be a problem, and there's going to be a couple of plays that Kamara makes that are going to be just plays where he's just going to be better than our guys. And so the hope is that the game isn't so close that those plays wind up being the difference in the Saints winning or in the Falcons losing. So hopefully the Falcons offense can take care of business and hopefully take the Saints run game out of the equation, because I do expect Ingram and Kamara to have success on Thursday. And I think the best scenario for the Falcons stopping those two guys is by getting a 2-score lead early in the game and basically saying, okay, now the only weapon that you have is Kamara in the passing game, and we don't have to worry about Michael Thomas. We don't have to worry about Ingram's running the football, and we know we don't have to worry about any of your other wide receivers and tight ends. So you become a one-dimensional team, and we can defend that. I think that's the best case scenario for the Falcons, but we'll see if the offense plays up to their potential, and we'll see if the defensive line can take care of business and really get after Drew Brees. I think they can. So I'm relatively confident, even if I don't sound like I'm super confident. I'm confident that the Falcons certainly have the capacity to really control this game. It's just a question of whether they actually do it.
I agree. It'll be a big game where the momentum means everything. And I do think that they can stop Kamara and Ingram if they focus on the run game. I mean, the Saints don't have a tight end right now. Their leading receiver at tight end is Josh Hill. That's not on injured reserve. And he has 12 targets on the year. They're leading, the question is whether they can stop the running backs out the backfield with Kamara. And even Ingram's been great out the backfield with 42 catches. I would have never guessed that watching him before the season, but this year he's been great. So they really have to make sure they have Deion Jones more or less man up a running back if he can. And then, I don't know, basically spy the fucking running back. That's all I can say. Spy the running back, and that's the best you can do. And I'm not worried about Breeze running on the Falcons.
Yeah. I don't think that's going to be an issue.
Because he's 37 years old, and I'm faster than him at this point? 38, sorry. 38 years old, and I'm faster than him at this point? No one's worried about Breeze running on the team. But when a guy's completing 71% of his passes, you got to smack him in the face. He's only been sacked 15 times all year. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that Breeze gets the ball out quick. But you got to smack him in the face.
Fair enough. All right, we got a question from Evan Birchfield. He asks, is the Saints game a must-win?
Oh, yeah. Every game from here on out is a must-win. If the Falcons don't win at least 3 of the 4 games to finish the season, they're not making the playoffs. And if they can win all 4, they're winning the division. So every game's a must-win.
Yeah, I don't want to sit here and be like, oh no, if the Falcons don't win on Thursday, all is lost. I don't want to put it in that situation. But this is a situation. They're at home. It's a short week. The Saints are beat up. It's not going to get easier than this, from here. Tampa Bay is easier. But, this is going, you can't assume that game 2 weeks from now is going to be easier, because the Saints could be a lot healthier and the Falcons could be more beat up in the intervening time. So it's one of those things where it's this is the most advantageous situation that the Falcons could potentially come across to face the Saints team. And so if they can't beat them this week, then it's going to be a little bit harder to necessarily expect them to beat them in 2 weeks. So I do think this is a must-win in that sort of situation where it becomes a lot harder to get 3 out of the next 4 wins if this game isn't one of those 3 wins. So, yeah, I think it is a must-win. Brian, at your homie Brian asked, do you think the Saints are really that much better than last year? I remember last year that they lost a lot of close games, and I'm not shocked by their 9-3 record.
I mean, I don't think that they are a lot better than last year. I think they've had the ball bounce their way a couple times in games this year. But at the same time, like, they are better, but they're also luckier. Like, they got a Bears team that was beat up and playing Trubisky. They've gotten a Bucs team that's not good. I mean, I feel like their schedule is a lot easier than it was than the Falcons was this year. Just even from week to week, they've been getting different versions of these teams showing up than what the Falcons have gotten. So I don't know. I do think they're better. I don't think they're that much better, and I think they're a pretty overrated team outside of their run game. I think their run game has been killing it. I think Breeze is, what Breeze always is, 8 yards attempts, 69+% completion percentage guy. Like, that's Drew Brees. So Breeze is no different than what he always is. It's just what has the run game, and they finally gave him a run game.
Yeah,
Cameron Jordan.
I'll give the Saints credit. They are much better than I thought they were going to be. I thought they were going to be an 8-8 team at best this year. They've already surpassed that. They'll probably wind up finishing this season with 10 or 11 wins, maybe even more. Hopefully the Falcons have something to say about that. I did not expect their run game to be as good as it is. They've sort of transformed their offense to we're going to pass it every down. To we're going to run it every down. And I think it's been very effective for them. Their defense has played much, much better. I knew that they had, I thought Lattimore could be a good player. I didn't expect him to be as good this early in his career. Obviously, Cameron Jordan's been a good player for a long time, but he's certainly playing his best football. And a lot of the other sort of complementary pieces on their defense have played well this year. That tends to happen when you have overall success. It means that some of those, that success trickles down to some of the mid-level players that you have. We saw that with the Falcons last year. So I'll credit the Saints. They played much better than I thought they would this year. Kudos to them. But, ultimately, at the end of the day, I think the Falcons can beat them. They can take them. And so all that success will, hopefully be moot by this time, Thursday night. All right, let's get to the call-outs of the week. What is grinding our gears? My personal call-out is dedicated to my good friend Matt Carrolley out there and any other Falcon fans that feel the need that they should be able to tell other Falcon fans how they should be fans. Like, a big talking point for some reason over the last couple of days has been the fact that the Falcons, seats are empty and the stadium's not very loud. Obviously, we want the stadium to be at full capacity. Obviously, we want the stadium to be as loud as possible. But what bothers me is the type of fans that get on here and basically talk trash, either subtly or overtly, about other fans and act like their typical type of fandom is the right way of being a fan. And I have a personal grudge against this. This is a personal pet peeve of mine because I grew up in Virginia. I didn't know any Falcon fans growing up. I grew up in everybody was a Redskins fan or a Cowboys fan, with a couple of Steeler fans sprinkled in here or there. And so I didn't really meet any Falcon fans until, I was like 15, 16, and, got on the internet and met some Falcon fans online and was embraced by the online community as being an out-of-state fan. And that was, that probably explains a lot of the stuff I do today. And what ended up happening with me was because people had whatever issues with me, I'm just as opinionated now as I was then. So maybe people had some issues with maybe some of my opinions back then. And what they would do is basically say, oh, you don't go to the games, you don't watch the game, you're not a real fan, so what you say doesn't matter. And so I have a personal problem when other fans try to sit here and act like, well, we're the real fans and these are fake fans and all that type of stuff. You don't know what other people are going through. You don't know what other people know. And it bothers me when people go on comment threads, like if you're on the Falcoholic or Blog at 30 or Falcons Wire or wherever, and someone says, what's your prediction for the game this week? Well, I think the Falcons are going to lose. I picked the Vikings to win. I picked the Saints to win. And people come in the comment thread and say, oh, you're a fake fan because you didn't pick the Falcons to win this week. You don't know anything about any of these people. And to sit here and push your own sort of arbitrary standards of what fandom is on other people is ridiculous. You don't know anybody's circumstance. If people show up late to the game, that's their prerogative to show up late to the game. You have no idea. That person could have car trouble. That person could be visiting their sick grandmother, and the only time they get off of work isn't until 2 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon, and they can only show up in the second half. So if you want to sit there and judge other people and be like, just because you've been to one Falcon home game in your life, and just because you had the ability to go to a game early and be as loud as possible, and everybody else should live up to that standard, like that type of thinking to me is it doesn't make you a better fan than other people. It just makes you an asshole. And so for me, like, I don't like people that try to sit here and tell other people how to be a fan. We can have disagreements on opinions. We can disagree on whether Vic Beasley should be a defensive end or a linebacker, but it doesn't make Scott any less of a fan than I am, or anybody else if you have a disagreement. And so I really have a problem with people that try to sit here and act like I'm a real fan, I'm a diehard fan, and everybody else is a fake fan. You know what? With Falcon fans have a reputation for being very fair weather and very fickle. That reputation is probably partially earned. But you know what, guys? There are no prizes for being the world's greatest fan base. The Chiefs are continually praised as one of the world's great fan bases. But you know how many Super Bowls the Chiefs have won in the last 40 years? Zero. How many Super Bowls have they been to in the last 40 years? Zero. There are no prizes for being great fans. So if Falcon fans are bad fans, then guess what? Who cares? All that matters is the Falcons win games, whether their fan base is out there supporting them or not. Who cares? So I think people need to go about their lives, worry about yourself. If you want to be a loud Falcon fan, then go to the games and be loud. If you're not, if you're sitting at your home on your couch and you just want to do you. Don't worry about what other people are doing. Just do you, and don't try to make other people live by your arbitrary distinctions and your arbitrary rules of being a fan. All that you're required to be a Falcon fan is to say, hey, guys, I like the Falcons. I root for the Falcons. That's the only rule. And if you want to show up late to games, then be my guest, show up late to games. If that's your life choice, that's your life choice. You bought the ticket. You can do with it whatever you want. That's my rant.
Wow. Aaron gave us a nice rant. I agree with him on the vast majority of it. Although I will say, if you have tickets to a game, at least try and get there early. At least try and, use the seats that you bought, because to me it just seems like a waste of a couple $100 seats if you're not going to be in your seat and cheering on the team. But that's my thoughts on it. The whole point of buying the tickets is to go to the game and cheer for your team. But as far as what's grinding my gears, cheap hits. And I feel like this week was just the week of Gronkowski basically did a Randy Savage elbow drop on a dude and gave him a concussion. And then just last night's game, period. I know Shazier didn't go down with a dirty hit, but he went down with a nasty one that he was probably self-inflicted. Perfect got lit up by Juju Smith-Schuster. And then on the very next drive, George Iloka with a nasty, just ugly, defenseless receiver hit. Come on, y'all. I realize it's a rivalry, and yeah, I would love to see the Falcons hit Saints as hard as these guys are hit. But at the same point, I don't want to see a dirty hit. I want to see Keanu Neal knock a dude out of the game because he hit him so hard in the chest. That dude's just like, I can't breathe. And then he comes back in and he's fine. But I just want to see that happen. I don't want to see Keanu Neal concuss somebody like he did with Desmond Trufant. That's just insane to me. So yeah. And then don't get mad at these guys. Don't get mad at the league when they suspend or fine these guys. They should be suspended. They should be fined. Concussions are no joke, and let's stop having these idiots have these dirty hits. Like Juju should have been flagged twice for that play and had both of them stick the way that it was called because one was during the play, one was after the play. It should be 30-yard. Iloka should have been flagged for that. They were, but they should have been flagged. They will get fined. They will get suspended. That's what should happen. And they should be. They should be fined. And Gronkowski the hammer wasn't laid down hard for Gronkowski. He should have gotten 3. One for the hit, one for the taunting after it, and just one because he's an asshole. Like, fuck Rob Gronkowski. That is the dirtiest shit you've ever seen in a game. Is when a guy like that, who pretty much doubles the weight of the guy he landed, gets away with that. Fuck Rob.
All right, Scott. I think I won the rant contest, but kudos to you for trying to live in my shadow.
I normally win them, so congrats.
Yeah. All right, let's get to the rest of the mailbag. Jack Davis at Paper Sack Jack as do the Falcons lack a true on-field defensive leader?
I mean, I would say yes. I don't see Deion Jones firing guys up. Like, outside of maybe Rico Allen, I don't see a guy who fires up the team. And it wouldn't hurt to go out and get one this offseason. Where would you draft him? I have no idea. But I wouldn't hate drafting a guy like Derwin James to play kind of a weak side linebacker, nickel corner, third safety kind of hybrid role. Because I think that would fit all of what he can do. And it's not like he's small. He's 6'3", 220 pounds. So it wouldn't hurt to go out, get a guy like Derwin James, use him like that third guy, and then move, Devondre Campbell, the strong side linebacker. And then when you have your non-nickel package where you have the same personnel, you just adjust where guys are lined up. Your team up. So I think you do need a true on-field defensive leader. I don't know who that guy is exactly. I do think Derwin James could be a guy. It wouldn't hurt my feelings if they decided to have Deion Jones move the weak side linebacker and they drafted a true like Smith. But they need a true on-field guy.
Yeah, I think right now Ricardo Allen certainly qualifies. Now, whether that is what you're looking for, I think Allen does fit that mold. I think part of the issue is because this defense is young. Some of those leadership guys are still sort of in the developmental phase. I think Keanu Neal is a good leader, has the makings of a good leader. I think Grady Jarrett has the makings of being a good leader. I think Deion Jones has the makings of being a good leader. But I think some of those guys, particularly Jones, are still sort of developing as players and so really haven't found their feet in terms of that leadership role. And ultimately what you want from a leadership standpoint is you want the guys that are sort of at the tops of the communication. And so typically in a defense, that's free safety and middle linebacker. But you also want your leaders to be the guys because, a lot of people think about leadership on a football field as the rah type of guy. But it's really more the communicating on snap to snap and in the huddle about, where guys have to line up and look for this sort of things as opposed to like inspiring leadership. That sort of Ray Lewis mentality of leadership is good, obviously Ray Lewis, but that's a very, very rare thing. Most leadership is leadership by example. So when you want leaders on your team, particularly on defense, you want your best players to be your leaders. And I think because of that, that's why a guy like Keanu Neal and Grady Jarrett have that leadership capability and that leadership potential. But again, they're still only 2 and 3 years in their league. And I think the same thing with Deion Jones. Has that capability, but these guys aren't consistently the types of guys that when the Falcons need a stop, they're consistently making that play. You see it from Jarrett, you see it from Trufant, you see it from Neal, you see it from Ricardo Allen on occasion. You're not seeing it enough from Deion Jones, I think, quite yet for him to really carve out that role as a leader. But I think next year or the year after, potentially he could get there. Jean-Kevin Hong asks, I think it's about time Mr. Quinn to admit Deion Jones' experiment at Mike has failed in either draft or sign a Mike next year. To me, Quinn's defense has been fast, but physical, maybe not physical for the past 3 years.
Yeah, he's saying fast, but not physical.
Okay, yeah, that's a typo. I would like to know what y'all think about Deion Jones at this point in his career as the Falcons middle linebacker.
I like him in coverage. I hate him in run support. I mean, just awful in run support. He can't shut blockers. I thought he could last year, the second part of the season, but at this point in his career, he's just not a good run defender. He could be so much better than he is. He used to knife in and try and attack players in the backfield. I don't know what happened, but the line in front of him is better. It's keeping him cleaner, and he still can't make these plays. Like, I'm over Deion Jones as the middle linebacker as well, just from what I've seen. Use him as a weak side linebacker. Use him as a dime defender. Let him still call the plays, but get someone else to be the true Mike and let him be the one. Maybe Duke Riley is the guy that can be that true Mike, because Duke Riley can shed some blockers. I don't think Duke Riley can do everything you need him to do at will, though. So maybe flipping those guys is all you really need to do to make this team better. But that's my thoughts on this.
Yeah, I mean, look, I said this last year. I thought, Deion Jones was lacking as a middle linebacker, but I was willing to give him another year to see whether or not he would improve on some of those areas. I think he's been better over the last 6 weeks than he's been over the first 6 weeks. I think he was pretty awful the first half of the season. I think he's played better. I don't think it's always resulted in sort of better production quite to the degree that I think a lot of people are looking for at that spot. But I certainly think his play has been better over the last 6 weeks than it was earlier this season. Certainly, I wouldn't be against adding a new middle linebacker. I don't really feel the need to draft a new middle linebacker just because I don't think adding another young, inexperienced player is going to really help you out in that regard. I think if you just want, we have plenty of youth. We have Jones, we have Riley, we have Campbell. We should still have Jermaine Grace, but, that's a conversation for another day.
He was undrafted. You can find guys like him every year. I know you like Jermaine Grace, but there's guys like him that go undrafted every year that we fall in love with in the preseason, and then all of a sudden they're let go and everybody flips out. Come on, man. You and I both know they can find someone like Grace every single year.
I agree with you. You're right. You can find a player like Grace, but that was a player you didn't have to find because you already had Grace. So that resource that you could now you have to use to replace Jermaine Grace, you could have used to upgrade another position. That's my.
Oh my God! A $5,000 signing bonus for an undrafted free agent linebacker. I realize what you're saying here, but you can go out and find those guys everywhere.
I agree. I'm just saying, like you had some young speed and talent but it is what it is. Sean Witherspoon's got to eat too. So. Yeah, I think you can make the upgrade to middle linebacker. I think at this point, I think your options are you either use a first-round pick on a high-level middle linebacker. I know a lot of Falcon fans are big fans of Roquan Smith. I haven't really done enough scouting of these college guys to really have an opinion, a draft opinion.
He's Bobby Wagner good.
I've seen a little bit of him. I'm not a Georgia fan. Surprise, surprise. So I don't watch Georgia every week, but what I've seen of him, I've been impressed. But I haven't really sat and watched him to know if I would feel comfortable with the Falcons taking him in the first round enough. So, but a lot of people like him, so I'm just going to give a lot of people that have good opinions about draft prospects generally the benefit of the doubt and say that they know what they're talking about. Outside of that, like you look at the free agent market and you got guys like Paul Posluszny and Navarro Bowman that are available. Both of those guys would be that sort of leader that Jack was asking about in the middle and sort of would maybe help some of our young guys learn how to be a little bit.
Sucks.
Yeah, I mean, like I'm not going to sit here and be like it's I don't. I think that's really the situation that the Falcons are in, unless some solid veteran gets cut after this offseason. You'll. I don't think there's really a good solution for the Falcons that doesn't require them basically overspending on a position that they don't necessarily need to spend on. So I'm content with letting these guys grow and just upgrading the rest and just using those resources on upgrading the defensive line.
The one guy I'll disagree with you, and it's only with one guy that I think is really good that is probably underrated is Avery Williamson, who's with the Titans right now. I think he is extremely underrated. I think if you can get him in here, he could be that guy that could run that middle and do a great job with it.
He's a good player. I won't deny that. So, yeah, I just feel like, throwing more resources at the linebacker position, I just think it's kind of a waste of resources. I'd just rather invest those in other spots of the roster where I feel like you can do better. I think we just got to be, maybe these guys develop and become good. I do think Duke Riley has a lot more upside than people are giving him credit for. I think he's gone through some rookie year struggles, and I think he's been, for various reasons, vilified for those that I think is a little bit unfairly. But I do think in a year or two, once he gets more time to develop, I think Riley could be probably our best linebacker potentially. So for me, it's one of those things like I'm willing to let Campbell grow. I'm willing to let Jones grow. I'm willing to let Riley grow. I'm willing to let Beasley grow as a linebacker. And I think with those guys playing at linebacker, you still have a lot of young, untapped potential there. And just invest those resources, upgrade the cornerback depth, upgrade the defensive line, invest in your offensive line, those types of things, rather than trying to find that next Bobby Wagner guy that's going to magically solve all your linebacker issues. That guy probably does exist, but unless you get lucky, I don't think you're necessarily going to that guy's going to fall into your lap. So that's my thoughts. At Matt Stars, I realize our defense is designed to not blitz much, but what percentage are we blitzing? No pool last week, but feels forever since we saw that on any other blitz. Couldn't hurt to try and create some havoc, turnovers, etc. What's your thoughts?
I think the Falcons blitz probably 25% of the time, 20 to 25% of the time.
Last I saw the numbers, it was about that, yeah.
And a lot of times it's just that standard five-man rush. They'll line up with the four-man line, and then they'll have either Beasley or Campbell at strong side linebacker, and then they'll just rush the five of them, straight up rush the quarterback, no one doing anything crazy. So outside of those, it's more that they need to bring variety. 20-25% is what they should be blitzing with this defensive scheme. It's just they need to bring more variety to it.
Yeah, no, I think last week particularly was because they were playing so much zone, and a lot of their blitz is based off of their ability to play man. And without Trufant in the lineup, they're not going to blitz as much because the issue with blitzing is you got to play man on the back end because you're basically risking the possibility you have less guys in defending in coverage because they're now blitzing. So it's one of those things where I think last week's particularly they played so much zone, they didn't blitz as much. I think they've done a healthy amount of blitzing this year. They do a lot of five-man pressures. Often it involves bringing Campbell on a blitz. I would prefer to see them start to utilize that type of blitz with Beasley when he's on the field, but for various reasons, that hasn't really been the case. Campbell's done a pretty good job blitzing. Don't get me wrong; he's actually probably done a very good job blitzing from a production standpoint, based off of his limited opportunities. So, it seems to work. The Falcons' blitzes are pretty vanilla in terms of what their designs are to be. This is not really a scheme that's really designed to blitz a whole lot. I would love to see them sort of try to mix that up, but Dan Quinn is just not a knock on him because it obviously works. Certainly he's got a track record, but his defensive scheme is pretty vanilla and pretty basic. So he's not going to do a whole lot of exotic things to really throw you off. He's going to he's going to play his style of defense, and it's going to be on you offensively to figure it out, as opposed to him trying to throw things at you that's going to confuse you. So maybe that just is one of the reasons why you're a little disappointed, Matt. All right, guys, we appreciate everybody tuning in. We know we came on a little bit earlier this week. This is probably going to be our new schedule for the immediate time. We'll try to send out more updates for any of you guys that are still used to the 9:30 time. But in the meantime, if you guys want to send in your questions with the mailbag, you can use the hashtag Falcons mailbag. My Twitter handle is at FalcFans. Scott is at Carasset S. Of course, the show's Twitter handle is Falcons PFC. Be sure to check us out on ProFootballCentral.com, where you can find all the links to iTunes and all that type of stuff where you can subscribe to the podcast. We know there have been issues over the last 6 months with iTunes, and we're hoping to get those figured out soon. And we'll definitely keep you guys updated when those issues get solved. But we appreciate you guys coming on. Be sure to subscribe to us on Pro Football Central on YouTube. Also, check us out, Falcon Central Radio on Facebook, so that you guys can get the updates to when the show is live and all that type of stuff.
Where's Brian?
I did not send him a 5-minute warning, so maybe we're still live. We might be live right now, so if this is extra stuff for you guys, then you guys get a treat.
What was it we were talking about before the show? The strength of schedule?
Yeah.
So the Falcons have played the longest strength of schedule or the hardest strength of schedule in the league this year. And I think if they do end up making the playoffs, they'll have a good